Hello and welcome to Sly Records Podcast, Christian review, commentary, news on all things pop culture and video game worthy. I'm your host, Sly Carl, and today we got 4 stories. Shouldn't be too long of an episode. And on screen, if you're watching, we have a picture of Jeff Keighley, founder of the Game Awards and Game Fest, Summer Game Fest. So news that hit my news cycle recently was that a week or so ago that E3 is probably not going to happen again this year. Um, the ESRBR, I think is what it is. They are deciding to bow out, which is fine and dandy, which is disappointing in the sense that they were the primary manufacturers of the cool new stuff, new trailers, all that jazz for what's coming out this coming fall for the holiday schedule. And last year, before that time slot, Summer Games Fest filled that void, and so did, I believe also last year there was an actual digital E3 event, and then a couple companies were doing their own thing. But it looks like Summer Game Fest is going to fill that void even more now. Their schedule is, let's check real quick. June 9th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. That's when Summer Game Fest is going to happen this year. Jeff has already lined up a handful of partners, and so this news story comes from Fanbyte. Publishers like Square Enix, Riot, Capcom, Activision, EA, Gearbox are expected to be there. So this is a good thing. Jeff Keighley has always been a proponent for E3, as very much in this fact sense that he always was favored in the sense that he grew up with it, he appreciates it, and just like lots of other gamers out there, understands the significance of having a press conference dictating the news that's coming up and showcasing those games, putting support for those games. He was vocal in the sense, not terribly vocal, but he did say that he thought E3 was heading in a different direction and he wasn't going to be supportive in that direction. So he's going to come up and do his own thing. On their website, they already have events listed for the Tribeca game show, and the Xbox presentation will also be there in the following week. So it's a good thing to look forward to. Alright, to our next story. This is going more towards a negative, or not a positive, an unpositive story in the sense that video games from a manufacturer with consoles still feeling the woes of manufacturing restraints due to COVID and due to the recovery of it. Who gets what dibs and what factories and who's able to be in line to make their systems and to make the chips that go into those systems has been not on the rise of how we would want them to be in manufacturing right now. So this news story comes from Axios. Nintendo and Sony indicated that it's going to be hard to continue to grab those well into this year. This was told to the investors. Nintendo lowered its Switch projections for the 12-month period, and Sony did it on. Sony was projecting 22 million, but now it's set to be around 18 million. This is still in the realm of doubling what they've already have done, which was 11.5 million, but it's not the growth that you would want to see. Hopefully, all of the early adopters of the PlayStation 5 are settled, and then hopefully all of the people who think that they can go out and buy and then resell the PS5 have either overbought or have no longer have value in doing that. So hopefully with those early buyers out of the way, more late adopters and regular people will be able to get their hands on the PS5. Alright, to our next story. This is a somewhat interesting story from a wider viewpoint, let's say, that if you, instead of being nailed down to playing video games, and I don't play EA sports games typically that often anymore, but you zoom out and you look at the world, that soccer is a big aspect of the world, and that the FIFA organization has a big name for soccer. But this story is that EA is now dissolving their partnership with FIFA organization who puts on the World Cups stuff. That this year will be the last game that EA and FIFA will be a partnership with, and that they are now splitting, and EA Sports is free to do their own, and so is FIFA. The looking at glass per se would be that this is two big companies who used to have all the fun in the world making games together, and now they are no longer happy with one another. Things do have this happen like this in the world, but it's interesting in the perspective that this is probably as far as corruption and greed might go. You can dive into FIFA more as an organization if you want to, but I'm going to continually to dive in from what this means from a video game standpoint. So according to a New York Times report, that this is because of FIFA's naming rights, that they wanted basically to double that number. Can you guess what that number is? Were you thinking that the rights to say FIFA on a box is worth billions of dollars? Well, apparently, I guess it might be. It was licensed to be about 2.5 billion over the next decade. That's a lot of moolah. But let's rewind a little bit and see what the news was on this. That there was some news on this trickled out about a month or so ago in February, that EA CEO told and basically implied that FIFA's brand is just 4 letters on the box. It's just those letters, and that they're paying for that, and that they're not getting much usage out of this rights. And if you were back there and reading into the tea leaves and predicting and foreseeing what a company might do, you probably would have maybe come to this conclusion that they are divorcing from the standpoint. Then when EA confirmed that they were making their own game, FIFA confirms that it will also create its own rival game, and that their quotes are the only authentic real game. It's a very interesting thing to say. That this rivalry might be ferocious, that for some reason the FIFA brand and that organization feels like they're more value than what people have been enjoying. That for some reason there is an idea that this video game isn't as worth, or clearly not worth as much as just those letters on the box. That people don't enjoy the game because it's a good game. They enjoy it because it's based off of a sport game or a sport that they really like. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think FIFA is going to lie on its face, in a sense that this idea that your brand is worth as much as whatever it could be just because you can put it on something. It might be worth it to someone who's going to the mall and buy, okay, I'm only going to buy these because it says Adidas or Nikes on it, without having the the idea of what that means from a standpoint of what the contents of the box is. Like, there is expectations of a brand. There's expectations that your Nike shoes are good shoes, and that's why you continually buy them, because and that you do get it. But the problem would be in the sense that your name isn't the only thing on the box. That FIFA has always been coincided with EA. That EA Sports has also been in the box, that the developer is also on the box, that the athletes are on the box, that the teams are on the box, and that majority of all of that is already in EA's camp. That EA is already continuing making the games that they make every year by developers that they already have good favor with, that they're building and shipping out quality games, that they already have the aspect of the games that make them money. It's not just the fact that we're going to go out there, sell games to the consumers, and they're going to be happy with that. EA makes buckets of money on selling on their legendary loot box systems within the game. That the game is a means to make more money through buying like blind packs and building your ultimate team through that and pursuing that. FIFA's not going to have any of that. FIFA has to start from square one. They have the name of their game, which I can figure out. I can put out a name of a game, and who will buy it? No one will. But FIFA has a long road ahead of them, and then the question is, who's going to make this new game? Do you, audience, anybody else in the world, know of another soccer game? Besides Mario Strikers, maybe for some of you out there. That you know that there is a good quality game that makes just as much money as FIFA. There isn't anybody who makes as much money as EA did with FIFA. The other game out there on the market is Konami's Evolution Soccer. And are you just going to go over to Konami, say, hey, pull that name off of there, put FIFA on there, and ship it? I don't think that's clearly the closest option for that. Like back in the day when you're playing on your Super Nintendo or your Genesis or whatever, and you have naming rights and then you put a new name on it and stuff, that's all fine and dandy in a sense that you're just shipping a single game to a new audience, but that's not what we're doing. We are making games for particular people who love soccer and playing like that. And EA Soccer will provide for that. And FIFA probably won't. Now on to our next story. Sticking with EA. So EA owns the Need for Speed's franchise. They make those games once every other year or so. Previously, they've made it with this developer called Ghost Games. And the baton was then passed now to Criterion Games, and they're making the current Need for Speed game. News for that has happened this week is that Criterion and a studio of Codemasters are now joining forces and becoming just under the umbrella of Criterion. So Codemaster Studio was already working on Need for Speed with them, and apparently in the article it says that the relationship is good enough and culture is similar enough to just become one underneath the banner. Which is nice in the sense that we do have this forward one singular project, and let's just focus on that and become as one. But Codemasters is very much an interesting thing in the aspect of when you're cutting a pie, when you're cutting the video game industry into a pie, and then you have genres within that, and then you look at the racing category, and then you see EA Sports, you see what Codemasters was doing, and then the other piece of that pie is very small. And so, backpedaling again back to a previous news section, that EA bought Codemaster and it was finalized this year, in a sense, in that now the racing genre, the specific genre that some people really get into and really love, those racing games, have really only one option to play from, to sink their teeth into. It is now just EA, because Codemasters was bought, and so F1, MotorStorm, and a bunch of other franchises were limited into the EA scope. And the worry is that they were no longer going to have a diverse plethora of games to be sold to us as consumers, as of the players. That we'll be just playing dumb Need for Speed games over and over again, and that we'll have F1 and then 2 other games, and that's our selection. Codemasters was doing creative and different things with racing. They had different ideas, different ways of making racing just that on the track, having different vehicles, different versions of vehicles, and those creative ideas. And now that may be taken away. And that was very much the fear when EA bought Codemasters. That's what's the discussion that you'll probably trip over if you're looking into this, that there is that fear of this. And the other interesting thing about this is, before EA bought Codemasters bought up this development studio, this team, and this team, um, they developed some of those creative ideas. They developed MotorStorm. They developed the Drive Club game that was that was on the PlayStation. And this team was a Sony studio that was dissolved and then was picked up by Codemasters. And that this team, the Cheshire studio, is the one that now is combining into Criterion. So the farther that we go back into the story, the more and more it feels like that this creative influencing team is no longer going to be able to be that influenceable. That they are no longer going to be able to put out those cool new ideas, but they are now just part of EA and putting out whatever one of the big publishing companies will say and want them to do. Because when Codemasters did this, it was very praised upon, in the sense of that these developers who were left at the door, they are now having another opportunity to do this. And that there was concern that EA was buying Codemasters, and it was very much similar in the sense of it's the opposite of having creative influence, but they were just bought. And the hope was that Codemasters would still be able to go out and be creative. And now this feels somewhat in the sense that this is no longer the case. The only good thing is that Criterion has always done really good work. That Criterion was the Burnout Paradise, and I believe it was Need for Speed Most Wanted. They were always part of the more praised upon new Need for Speed games, and that they're grabbing the baton from Ghost Studios and heading off and making Need for Speed again. It's the idea of more of like making Need for Speed great again. That they're no longer stuck in this delusion of what Need for Speed is, but now that they're going into the reality of what Need for Speed is. And hopefully that this creative team will have, at some point, be able to be influential and continue to make Need for Speed great and making Need for Speed great as it could be, and that this is a positive thing and it's not the negative thing that could be in this world. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Appreciate it, and see you guys later.